Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here again to unpack some complex global events, and as always, we really aim to give you well-informed insights from, well, quite a stack of sources we've been digging through. Today, we're dissecting a really significant event, one that definitely sent some ripples across the geopolitical landscape just recently.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we really plunge into today's main topic, we wanted to highlight something special for those of you who appreciate, the deep currents of history. Because honestly, to really grasp the strategic chess game playing out today, understanding that history is just key.
Oh, completely.
Which is why we often find ourselves turning to resources like our friend Hui Wang's A History of China series.
Exactly. And it's not just like a dry list of dates and facts. It's really deeply researched, but it's also an engaging narrative. It genuinely brings Chinese history to life, and you start seeing patterns and influences that still resonate today.
Mm-hmm.
The latest installment, the Liao dynasty, it's out now, and it's a fascinating look at a really pivotal but often kind of overlooked period.
It really is. You can find A History of China, including the Liao dynasty, right there on Amazon, both ebook and paperback. It's just a fantastic resource for getting that historical context behind today's dynamics. We highly recommend it, sort of as a companion to these discussions we have.
Absolutely, yeah. Couldn't agree more. Okay, so let's pivot now and unpack this week's main event. The highly anticipated meeting between President Trump and President Putin, an event charged with expectation, definitely, though maybe not entirely surprising in how it ultimately turned out, at least according to the analyses we've been looking at.
Right. So this summit took place August 15th, 2025. In Alaska. Kind of a symbolically neutral ground, perhaps. Yeah. And right from the outset, analysts really held remarkably low expectations for any big breakthroughs. The consensus from the reports we've reviewed, it suggested President Trump went into this with significantly limited leverage.
Right.
And also showed, minimal willingness to commit substantial resources, particularly to Ukraine.
Yeah, that stands out.
Unlike, say, senior figures like Secretary Blinken, who usually come with detailed policy proposals, Trump seemed to shy away from major commitments. The analysis framed it as prioritizing personal political advantage over, strategic foreign policy goals.
And here's where the analysis gets really, really interesting, I think. This perceived approach, it connects directly to his apparent ambition for a Nobel Peace Prize. That's been widely reported, hasn't it?
It has. But the path he reportedly envisions to get there, which is essentially pressuring Ukraine to concede significant land.
Yeah.
Well, that's deemed overwhelmingly unrealistic by multiple sources we've consulted. Just not feasible.
And the U.S. has already used pretty much every sanction imaginable against Russia, right? I mean, we're talking huge financial penalties, asset freezes on oligarchs, even cutting off major banks from SWIFT.
Exactly. Which leaves Trump with almost no economic or diplomatic tools left. Short of direct military force, of course.
A path he seems entirely unwilling to pursue. Actively avoids, even.
Mm-hmm. So this meeting, it really echoed his past summits, especially with Kim Jong-un. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
Huge media fanfare, immense media fanfare, global headlines, tons of speculation. But ultimately, very few substantive, tangible results came out of them.
Right. Lots of noise, little substance.
Precisely. Yet, despite that lack of concrete outcomes this time, one side clearly emerged ahead. President Putin. Russian commentators, for instance, they didn't just call the visit a success. They hailed it as a monumental victory. They were loudly proclaiming it as undeniable proof that the West's whole isolation policy against Russia had definitively collapsed.
So, okay, what does this all actually mean for the bigger picture? Putin just showing up on U.S. soil.
Yeah.
Especially with that International Criminal Court warrant for war crimes hanging over him.
Yeah, that was stunning.
That in itself was an incredible display of confidence, defiance even. It sent a huge message.
And the optics around his welcome just reinforced that narrative. Think about the B-2 bomber flyover during the red carpet welcome.
I saw that footage.
Our sources really point out the proximity, how close Trump and Putin were standing during that flyover. The analysis we've seen suggests this wasn't about intimidation at all.
Not a warning shot.
No, quite the opposite. Interpreted as ceremonial respect, the kind usually reserved for major world leaders. The whole scene, the analysis suggested, looked less like a warning and more like a grand, formal welcome. It just reinforced Putin's status.
Yeah.
And what's truly fascinating here, maybe Putin's biggest win from the whole thing might simply be The photograph, just the picture with President Trump.
Just the image itself.
That single image, our sources indicate, carries immense symbolic weight. It visually shatters Russia's isolation on the world stage. Think about the ripple effect.
Yeah.
If the U.S. president engages directly with Putin, seemingly ignoring international warrants and norms, it could really embolden European states, encourage them to pursue their own direct talks with Moscow. Right?
Circumventing the whole Western consensus.
Exactly. It could fracture that transatlantic unity that's been a cornerstone for decades. That image alone has huge potential power.
Meanwhile, the summit also, apparently, spotlighted what one of our key sources called Trump's recurring pattern of talk tough but back down. They actually used a specific term, taiku.
Taiku, what does that mean?
Well, our analysis says it's borrowed from Japanese. It describes this strategy where you have really aggressive initial rhetoric, lots of threats.
Okay.
But then it's followed by a notable lack of action when the deadline passes or the confrontation actually escalates.
Ah, I see. So like the threat just before the summit.
Exactly. Just 2 weeks before Alaska, Trump publicly threatened new severe sanctions if Russia didn't agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine by a specific deadline.
Yeah.
The deadline came. The deadline went. No ceasefire materialized. In fact, sources say Russia's offensive actually intensified around that.
Right. And no new sanctions?
No new sanctions were enacted. The threat, according to this analysis, just ended up being empty, which, diminishes credibility.
Yeah, it does. So this pattern, what does it tell us about the actual negotiations? Or maybe the lack of serious negotiation?
Well, look at the joint press conference. That seemed to illustrate a pretty significant imbalance, didn't it?
It really did. It lasted, 12 minutes total?
Barely. And President Trump spoke for under 3.5 minutes of that.
While Putin spoke for more than 8. And crucially,
neither of them even mentioned the word ceasefire.
Not once.
Right.
Which signals pretty clearly it wasn't a priority in their discussion. A foreign news outlet even pointed out how quiet Trump was.
Which is unusual for him at press conferences.
Very unusual. He's typically verbose, dominates the room. This quietness, almost subdued manner suggested the talks maybe didn't go as he'd hoped, or he found himself with less control than usual.
That silence speaks volumes, maybe.
Perhaps.
Okay, so if that's the dynamic, the outlook for Ukraine. Well, the sources you mentioned paint a grim picture.
Particularly grim, yes. By excluding President Zelensky entirely from these talks.
Just leaving him out completely.
It effectively put Ukraine, as the saying goes, on the menu for discussion between Trump and Putin.
If you're not at the table. Well, that's a classic, awful diplomatic spot to be in.
And European leaders reportedly expressed deep shock. Alarm even, pleading directly with Trump not to betray Ukraine.
But the analysis suggests those pleas.
Probably futile.
Given the perceived motivations at play, yes. The analysis suggests those appeals might prove futile.
So connecting this to the bigger picture then, the analysis suggests Trump could actually pressure Ukraine to surrender territory.
The analysis strongly suggests that yes. Areas like Crimea, Luhansk, Donetsk, they're considered highly unlikely ever to be returned to Ukrainian control, according to these sources.
Oh.
And for Trump to claim any kind of victory or peace deal, well, logically, Russia would need to retreat to its pre-2022 borders.
Which everyone agrees is basically impossible at this point.
Universally deemed impossible by the experts we've consulted. So any formal recognition of Russian gains, even minor ones, would mark a huge defeat. Not just for Ukraine, but for the U.S. too. It would fundamentally alter that post-World War II international order. And that's a critical point, isn't it? Previous U.S. administrations, Republican or Democrat, they always carefully avoided formally recognizing annexed territories like Crimea.
Meticulously avoided it.
They ensured that, okay, the land was occupied, but it wasn't formally lost in the eyes of international law. That kept the door open, maintained a clear stance.
Right. It preserved the principle of non-recognition of illegally seized territory.
So Trump's reported dream of getting a Nobel Peace Prize by essentially legitimizing Russian control.
Yeah.
It seems, well, detached from reality, according to these sources.
Deeply detached. Historically, the prize goes for conflict resolution that upholds international law, human rights, not for formalizing illegal land grabs. Some analyses even suggested the Nobel Committee might just skip awarding the prize that year rather than give it for something like that.
Okay, so symbolically then, and maybe this is the most significant part, the Alaska summit genuinely restores Putin's status on the global stage.
It represents a major breach in that diplomatic isolation the West had tried so hard to build.
It could even pave the way for Russia getting back into forums like the G8.
It absolutely could. It raises that very real possibility, and maybe even more immediately, the possibility that sanctions could soon be lifted and Russian control over occupied regions just tacitly accepted by more countries.
Which would be a massive shift.
A fundamental shift from the isolation policy. It changes Russia's international standing, the whole geopolitical balance.
And for Ukraine and for many European nations, that's got to be a truly sobering prospect. Desperate, almost.
Bordering on desperate is right. Reports from our sources already suggest European leaders are scrambling, offering President Trump huge energy and investment deals.
Really. Trying to buy influence.
Trying to soften his stance, prevent what they see as a catastrophic betrayal. We've seen figures mentioned like $750 billion from Europe for U.S. energy deals.
$750 billion.
Or hundreds of billions in investments from places like Japan, South Korea. These numbers are so astronomically high. For some countries, it would reportedly exceed their entire foreign exchange reserves.
That just shows the level of desperation, doesn't it? The lengths they might go to mitigate this potential shift.
It really underscores it. So in the end, while the official statements from the summit were, predictably vague, non-committal.
As they often are.
Right. The underlying dynamics revealed by our sources seem remarkably clear. This summit was less about actually resolving a complex conflict through diplomacy.
And more about?
More about raw power, leverage, and notably personal ambition playing out on the world stage.
With huge implications for Ukraine and global stability.
Profound implications. It seems the key goal for Putin was achieved just by the meeting itself happening. The appearance, not any specific agreement. The appearance, not any specific agreement. The photo op. The meeting itself that was the victory.
Right. That brings us towards the end of today's deep dive. We really hope this analysis has given you, our listeners, a clearer, maybe more nuanced understanding of the Trump-Putin summit and all its layered dynamics, pulling out the insights that really matter from all the material we've sifted through.
Yeah, definitely. And hey, don't forget to explore Hui Wang's A History of China series on Amazon. It really does provide valuable historical context that illuminates so much of what's happening now.
Absolutely. Join us next time as we continue unpacking the complexities of our world. And maybe as you reflect on this summit, here's a thought to chew on. In international relations, when peace seems to be achieved through concessions made under duress, does that truly lead to lasting stability? Or does it just set the stage for a temporary pause in a much larger ongoing power struggle? Something to think about.